The Super Bowl might be over, but 2024's fantasy football season starts now. Free agency is just around the corner. There are plenty of questions to answer. I've got 15 free agent wide receivers who could shift the landscape so much over the coming couple of months. We're going to look at their market value, best ball ADP, current dynasty value, help you decide if you should be rostering them in 2024. Number one, Tee Higgins. Sounds like the Bengals are going to use the franchise tag, and you can't blame him. Why would you want to let a player of Tee Higgins' quality hit the open market? Even if they decided to tag and trade him, that would be better than letting him go for a third-round compensatory pick. The Bengals are fourth in cap space for 2024, so they can definitely afford to do this. It's just about whether that's the right priority. We saw last year their defense was awful at allowing explosive plays. If you ask me, they probably need to shore up that side of the ball a bit more, but they seem to believe that Tee Higgins is the player who can set them over the edge and get them back to a Super Bowl. It wasn't a great year for him. I mean, he played through injuries. Joe Burrow's injuries didn't help either. He only played 12 games, and in 3 of those, he played below 55% of snaps. 7 games with 3 or fewer catches, finished outside the top 36 wide receivers on 8 occasions. But he absolutely is the most talented player who's kind of even semi-available. If Tee Higgins hits the market or is even remotely available, the best teams for him would be the Bengals. His relationship with Joe Burrow is obviously a good one. The Chiefs. Imagine Tee Higgins out there instead of Kadarius Toney, instead of Marcus Valdes-Scantling, instead of Justin Ross, instead of Richie James. Tee Higgins with Patrick Mahomes would be fantasy gold, and I think you'd be looking at a top 12 wide receiver easily. And the other one that stands out is the Panthers. They have to be aggressive finding answers for Bryce Young, and Tee Higgins is the kind of superstar player, potential superstar player who could really help a quarterback going through some teething pains. Higgins' current value is the 106 in Dynasty Superflex leagues. In 1 QB, get him for 103. And then on Underdog, his ADP, it's dropped by a decent amount since last year when he was a second-round player. Now you're looking at pick 42 overall. And I think when we see what happens with Tee Higgins, that's going to rise up by perhaps half a round or so. We've got loads more wide receivers coming your way, but first, we are closing in on 1,700 subscribers. We've got so much Dynasty content, so much rookie content, so much best ball content, and even redraft content before we get to the games being played. Help us help you. We've got so many good guests coming your way. Number 2, Michael Pittman. 10 targets a game last year, the 7th most. Indy, they've got enough money that they could use the franchise tag on him, but you imagine that they're going to try hard to get a deal done before then. It seems to come down to whether Michael Pittman wants to be in Indy or not. He's finished as a top 24 wide receiver or better in 3 consecutive seasons. Last year, he was the wide receiver 14, 1,100 yards, 4 touchdowns, and that's the area which could really grow for him. If Michael Pittman got to 8 touchdowns or even 10 touchdowns, we would have been looking at like wide receiver 6 or so last year. He had 6 weekly finishes with 18 plus PPR points, only 2 single-digit games all year. So it really comes down to how much Indy want to keep him there to be that kind of first option for Anthony Richardson, which we saw he was last year. You know, on the RPO plays, he was the first choice all the time. But we also saw him be able to play with Gardner Minshew. Michael Pittman is quarterback proof to me. The landing spot, the Colts makes too much sense. The Chiefs, we want to see everyone good end up with the Chiefs, but also the Panthers, for much of the same reason I talked about Tee Higgins landing with the Panthers. Michael Pittman would be great there. He's the kind of reliable player that Bryce Young looked to have in Adam Thielen over the first half of last year, but Michael Pittman's got way more left in the tank than Adam Thielen does. In terms of values, you're looking at a 105 in Dynasty Superflex. 1 QB, you're looking at about 103 range. And then on Underdog, 29.8. He's risen about 15 spots since last year. And that feels like the right spot for him. I'll be completely confident in drafting him. Not a player I'll draft 20% of, but if I can finish the season with 15% Michael Pittman, I'll be very happy. Number 3, Mike Evans, one of the most interesting names in this free agency group. They tried to work out a contract last year, and it got a little feisty, got a little tense between them. And then Evans goes out and has his 10th straight 1,000-yard season. He was a little up and down, though. There were 7 games over 18 PPR points, 5 over 25, but also 6 below 13 points. And this is what we've kind of talked about. Mike Evans feels like on the cusp of a Hall of Fame career, but I'm not sure he's quite there yet. He's projected by PFF to get a 3-year contract for $69 million. That seems completely fine for a player of 30 years old. It'd be great to see him back in Tampa. Him and Mayfield, they displayed more chemistry than perhaps we even saw from Evans and Tom Brady when Brady was there. Brady seemed to prefer Chris Godwin. The Bucs, they do have enough room to tag Mike Evans if they wanted to, but they'll need to get something worked out with Baker Mayfield before that. So yeah, there's plenty of ways that one could go. Dream landing spots, Tampa Bay at the top, of course. He's a Bucs legend. He doesn't need to go elsewhere. Panthers, I know Bucs fans are going to hate me for saying that one, but Dave Canales is now the head coach in Carolina. He's just spent time with the Buccaneers for the last year. It makes too much sense that he would see Mike Evans and be like, that is the kind of player we need to get Bryce Young. And then lastly, the Bears. The Bears need wide receivers. You know, imagine pairing Mike Evans with DJ Moore and then Caleb Williams. That is going to be a fantastic sort of offense, something which Chicago just hasn't had any time recently. Dynasty values, you can get Mike Evans for the 203. I really think he's a good bargain in Superflex leagues. I think, yes, he's going to continue to be a little bit up and down, but the ceiling outcomes are so good. The 112 in 1 QB leagues, and then over on Underdog, he's going at pick 33, which feels fine. Marquise Brown, I've got it on screen there, the biggest wild card of the wide receiver group. Would it surprise to see him sign a 1-year prove-it deal? Would it surprise you to see him sign like 3 years, $45 million, 3 years, $50 million? The Cardinals paid a first-round pick in exchange for Marquise Brown and a third-rounder in 2022 to get him away from the Ravens. And it's just been up and down ever since. Marquise Brown averaged 4.7 points per game with Murray at quarterback, 12.9 in games without Murray at quarterback. So it's not like you can even point to that and be like, this is a must-have relationship because they're such good friends off the field. Brown saw such high volume during the first half of the season that it made up in some ways for the lack of the quality quarterback play that he was dealing with. He had 5 15-plus point games compared to 4 below in 15 games without Murray. And then when Murray came back, his air yards per target jumped from 10.5 to 13.8. And all of a sudden, Marquise Brown was seeing deep targets again, but they weren't connecting on them. And now we've got Michael Wilson, who's emerging, a player who the Cardinals' new leadership seem very high on. Will they want to extend Marquise Brown, particularly if they're looking at drafting Marvin Harrison at 4th overall? Do they feel like they need to pay Marquise Brown whatever he thinks he's worth or franchise tag him at $20 million? I'm not so sure. Dream landing spots, Cleveland Browns. Hold with me for this one. The Browns need wide receivers. They need a field stretcher. Yes, they've got Amari Cooper. Yes, they've got Elijah Moore, who is very up and down. But they need somebody to really stretch a field. Marquise Brown's played in the AFC North. He was comfortable enough doing it, had his moments, and I think that would be a good match. Also put him on the Jets. We've got Garrett Wilson. Yes, now let's say the Jets make another run at Devontae Adams, but they can't pry him away. Somebody like Marquise Brown would be really interesting because we know we're not getting separation from someone like Alan Lazard. And then the last one, the Bills. The Bills are crying out for a wide receiver who demands a little bit coverage away from Stephon Diggs, and Marquise Brown would be that guy. In terms of current value, 204 in Superflex leagues, 201 in single QB leagues, and then Underdog ADP of 103.5. I think that's been a little bit disrespectful to Marquise Brown, and I will absolutely be drafting a lot of him if he stays at the price. 10 minutes into this video, I know I don't need to say this again, but hit that subscribe button. We've got so much more stuff coming your way. There are rookie mocks left, right, and center. Rookie profiles coming very soon. Number 5, Calvin Ridley becomes a free agent for the first time at age 29. Obviously, there's been the gambling stuff, which has really had an effect on his ability to hit free agency at this point. And Pro Football Focus project him for a 2-year, $32.5 million deal, which seems about fair because the Jags never really got the best out of him this year. They asked him to run a lot of high difficulty routes. They weren't easy for completions. You know, he was on the boundary a lot, or he was going deep, and there were no layups, there were no quick crossers, there were no slants. And he turned 176 targets into 70 receptions and 7 touchdowns. He will have a good market. I think, yes, it was a little bit slower last year than some of us might have hoped. But if he hits the free agency market, he's got the kind of abilities that teams are going to fall over themselves to put an offer in on. Dream landing spots for Calvin Ridley. Buffalo Bills, Chicago Bears, Patriots. And the Bears or Patriots, I think, you can really see where his quality would be needed. And imagine the Bills with Stephon Diggs and Calvin Ridley. Yes, the Bills are up against it a bit with the cap, but when you want to play, you can normally make it work. Ridley's current value in Superflex leagues to 112, 1QB leagues to 109. On Underdog going at pick 63. That's a little bit, quite a drop from last year where he was going in the second round, but pick 63 feels fine. We know he might be a little bit volatile, but we also know he's got the high ceiling performances available to him that we want for fantasy football. Number 6, Darnell Mooney. 2 weekly finishes inside the top 20 last year, and it was really disappointed because you go back to 2021 and he had 1,055 yards on 81 receptions. The Bears, they could do with him being there still. They need somebody behind DJ Moore, and they've got enough cap space. If they decide they want to bring him back and re-sign him, then that's definitely something that they should be able to do. We know Darnell Mooney isn't a wide receiver 1, but there are plenty of teams out there who want a wide receiver 2 or a wide receiver 3 with the kind of skill set he has. He's not going to give you elite separation, but he will give you a fairly reliable option when it comes to catching the ball. The Darnell Mooney landing spots, the Bears, the Falcons. The Falcons desperately need somebody who isn't Scotty Miller or, whichever XFL quality receiver they're putting out there across from Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Or the Patriots. The Patriots are completely depleted. They're losing so many players right now, and they badly need someone so we don't need to rely on Kayshon Boutte and Juju Smith-Schuster to be fantasy relevant. Mooney's superflex value is bottomed out. You can get him for the 310, 406 in 1QB leagues. Underdog, he's barely getting drafted, really around that 215 range. And I don't mind taking shots on him. I think there's definitely a world where he could be productive this year, where he could find himself in a more pass-happy offense. It gets forgotten about that. Yes, he had injuries this year, and Justin Fields had injuries this year. 2022, when Darnell Mooney was there, the Bears barely passed the ball at all. They were passing at a historically low rate. So now if we get him into a proper offense or with Caleb Williams or, into the Falcons with a quarterback upgrade, how good could he be? I think he could be better than we've seen him be. Gabe Davis, one of the most polarizing players in fantasy football. He is only 24. He is really young for a player hitting the free agency market. Averaged over 15 yards per reception every year of his career. And, we know what it's going to be like with Gabe Davis. He had 4 top 12 weeks in 2023, but he also had 4 outside the top 100, including several where he just didn't even make a single catch or have a single target. Davis doesn't earn coverage over respective defenses in the way that the Bills need him to draw defenders away from Stephon Diggs. And right now it feels like the Bills, they need to make changes on their offense. So it feels like the right time for Davis to move on. But Davis could go out there and be a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 on a bunch of other teams. If you're looking at dream landing spots, Gabe Davis at the Ravens is somebody who I'd find interesting. You can tell I'm a Ravens fan. The Ravens need a field stretcher. Whilst I don't think that Gabe Davis is utterly reliable, he's also not going to be the most expensive wide receiver out there. And that's something which a lot of teams will be drawn to. Again, the Bears, we know they need depth behind what they've got out there at the minute. I think he'd be a better field stretcher than they've had in the last few years. And then the Falcons, they've got to add somebody across from Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Gabe Davis' current value on Dynasty Superflex, you're looking at the 204, 1QB, 202. I think if you find somebody who's got Gabe Davis, they're probably going to be happy to sell him. And when the rookie drafts start happening, they'll probably be quite happy to part with him for even less than that value. On Underdog, you can see he's going at 127 right now. We've come a long way from 2 years ago when he was going at like pick 40 and the most divisive pick in best ball. And that feels fine. A pick 127, you can cope with the down weeks. You just have to build around it and have him as like your wide receiver 5 or 6 on your team. We're going to rapid fire through a few more of these, but Odell Beckham, 90.0 PFF receiving grade between weeks 9 to 14, really looked like he got back on track. And then he got to the playoffs and the Ravens barely used him. Up until that point, when he was on the field, he was getting targeted, though. He had 1.9 yards per route run, which is the same as Cooper Kupp, Chris Godwin, Devonta Smith. Sometimes it was to the detriment of the Ravens offense for over times when Lamar Jackson seemed to force the ball to him when it wasn't open. But Odell made plenty of plays downfield and was there in big moments. So at age 32, I think he's going to have suitors. I don't think that he looks completely toast or anything like that. The Ravens likely want him back, but it's got to be much cheaper. They've only got $7 million in cap space. Last year, they cost him $15 million. That was an overpay, but it was done to help appease Lamar Jackson, to make sure that Lamar saw that they were serious about getting him better wide receivers. Now it's got to be a deal that works for the cap as well. I'd expect this one to be something we hear about quickly because language in the Ravens contract with Beckham basically forces a massive bonus by next week unless they restructure things or sort out a new deal. So don't expect that one to drag on. Landing spots for Odell Beckham. Back with the Ravens, it makes too much sense. He seemed to really enjoy himself there. The team appreciated him. He appreciated them. He gets good rapport with Lamar. And at this point, he wants to be on a contender. Other teams, the Jets, they were very interested in Beckham last year. Aaron Rodgers really tried to make it happen, but it just didn't work out. And then the Chiefs, why would you not want to play with Patrick Mahomes? And we know they need better players at wide receiver. 90% of you watching this are not subscribed. I need you to hit that subscribe button. Help me to help you. We've got so much content coming your way that is going to make you more successful in fantasy football. Tyler Boyd. The Bengals, they simply can't pay everyone, and he could set career lows in yards per reception and yards per target last year. 11 single-digit fantasy weeks in 2023. When you're a volume-based slot receiver and you're not getting volume, then it's very difficult to be relevant. He had 9 games with less than 5 touches. And if you're not explosive and you're not getting the volume, then you're not fantasy relevant anymore. I think that Tyler Boyd, though, we could see a couple of interesting spots where he could land. Stick him on the Panthers. That would be interesting. The kind of reliable player that we've talked about Bryce Young needing. The Cardinals, if they're looking for a veteran, if they end up going not paying Marquise Brown, but they've got Marvin Harrison, they've got Michael Wilson, you probably want a veteran in the mix there. And then the Titans. So the new head coach of the Titans is a former Bengals staffer. It would make too much sense for him to try and get some level of quality into that room by bringing with him Tyler Boyd. That is the kind of reliable option who you can build an offense around. Curtis Samuel finished 2023 with 7 top 36 weekly finishes, possibly the most versatile wide receiver in free agency. This is the original Deebo Samuel. We want him to land somewhere with a creative offensive coordinator, a creative offensive coach, because we know he can get used in the run game as well as in the passing game. Commanders have the most cap space of anyone. If we want to re-sign him, then it's going to be very easy for him to do. But I think they've probably got more pressing areas that they want to pay attention to. Their defense needs a lot of work. They've got nothing on pass rush now. Their offensive line is a mess, and they need to work out what it is they need to prioritize. So I don't necessarily expect Curtis Samuel to be back there. The teams where Curtis Samuel would be a good fit, the Titans, again, he's the kind of versatile player that if you've got a creative offensive coordinator like the Titans now have, then that would be a good mix. The Bears, they just need anyone across from DJ Moore, and the same goes for the Falcons. Kendrick Bourne tore his ACL in week 8, and he played so well at the start of the year as well. It really looked like it was all clicking for him. He was a wide receiver 5 in week 1, had 6 catches, 64 yards, 2 touchdowns. But then obviously the Patriots offense just completely cratered, and it was really difficult for him. He had 3 games over 19 points in the 8 games he played, though. And he is a bit older at 28, so we don't want to suddenly just be thinking that he's younger just because he's getting to free agency. I think he's the kind of player that the Patriots should be looking to re-sign. He's been around them. He knows the culture. And yes, things are changing slightly. But the Patriots are going to lose Mike Gesicki, Hunter Henry, Juju Smith-Schuster looks washed. Kayshon Boutte is in all kinds of trouble because of the gambling allegations. Re-signing Kendrick Bourne would be a very savvy move for the Patriots. Other landing spots, the Jags, they need someone if they lose Calvin Ridley. Zay Jones was bothered by injuries all last year, and what's to say he's going to rediscover his 2022 form. And then the Colts, outside of Anthony Richardson, yes, they've got a bunch of players who are a bit younger and have some promise. But if you're looking for a guy who can go up and catch a ball, I like Kendrick Bourne to the Colts. DJ Chark, Pretty rubbish season, really. 33 receptions for 479 yards. Big week 16, but otherwise it was completely forgettable. He did lead the Panthers with 5 receiving touchdowns, tied Chuba Hubbard, who had 5 rushing touchdowns. But it was just hard for anyone to do too much last year. Chark is only 27. He's had some nice moments in his career, but it's just really hard for me to imagine him being fantasy relevant this year. And there isn't a single landing spot I can think of where I'd be like, now I need to draft DJ Chark. Michael Thomas. It's just sad that Michael Thomas's career hasn't developed how we might have hoped. You know, he was the wide receiver 1 in 2019, top 12 wide receiver in points per game for the first 4 years of his career. And then over the last 4 years, he's played 20 games combined. The Saints were over the cap as usual, and now just feels like the right time to finally move on, change the scenery for Thomas, bring in some new blood for the Saints, make Chris Olave the focal point of our offense, and really see if they can develop some younger wide receivers around Olave. I do have some landing spots in Michael Thomas that I like, though. The Broncos, the Sean Payton connection just feels too obvious. I mean, Sean Payton has signed so many ex-Saints at this point. If Michael Thomas was on the free agency market, I've got to believe that if the Broncos were moving on from Jerry Jeudy or even Cortland Sutton or even both, then Michael Thomas would be the kind of receiver that Sean Payton would want to bring to Denver. The Jaguars, I like this as kind of like a veteran move. I think that that's what the Jags need, some veterans on that offense right now. And then the Patriots just need warm bodies at this point, and Michael Thomas would be a very good veteran for them to have around. Josh Reynolds, age 28, seems to have had that trust with Jared Goff, you know, ever since they played together in LA and then they found themselves playing together in Detroit. There's been a good connection there. There's been points where Jared Goff has leaned on him in the red zone, and it's worked out nicely for fantasy. 40 catches for 608 yards, 5 touchdowns in 2023. But the team needs Jameson Williams to step up, and it might be easier for him to do that if Josh Reynolds isn't there. I think that wherever Josh Reynolds goes, that's when we can make a decision on whether he's a buy or whether we should be drafting him at current ADP. But right now, it's not worth a speculative shot. And then last, number 15, Noah Brown, age 28, had 3 top 10 weekly finishes last year. It was a real weird season for a player who was age 28 and just hadn't really shown us anything before now. He's never had consistency. Even last year, there wasn't much consistency. The best bet for Noah Brown would be re-sign in Houston with CJ Stroud, with Nico Collins, with Tank Dell, who take a majority of the focus away, and with the Texans set to lose Dalton Schultz as well. It feels like keeping as much together of that core as they can would be a really savvy move for them. Those are your top 15 wide receiver free agents. We've got so much stuff on the channel right now. Hit the links in the description, head straight over to the channel, hit subscribe. We've got rookie content, we've got Dynasty content, we've got best ball content coming very soon. We will do whatever we can to get you winning leagues in 2024.